you live in the gray rather than taking one side or the other. I think you kind of live in this gray. And that started this thinking of, I think there's a need for energy that is never going to go away, but how do you do it in the most sustainable way?
Hello, I'm Ananja, and you are listening to the Oil and Gas Breaking By show. Today, I'm happy and excited because we will be joined by Janice Tran, CEO and co-founder of Kanin Energy, an industrial decarbonization platform which is focused on turning waste heat into power and also unlocking many climate-friendly energy innovations. Janice has spent many decades as an investor before starting this climate tech company, which is focused on industrial systems innovation. Today, we will talk about something which does not get much attention in these energy transition discussions. This is about how industrial systems can become powerful energy resource by themselves. Very unique and exciting topic. Looking forward for our discussion today. Janice, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Anand. I'm super excited to be here, and always a pleasure to be talking about what we're doing with industrial waste heat and other decarbonization infrastructure. So
that's very interesting as you talk about industrial heat, because we always see industry as a consumer, not as a producer. So I'm looking forward for our discussion today. And first of all, thank you so much for taking your time, because we're trying to have this session for a long time, but because of travel and the schedules, it didn't work out. So we are having the session now.
Yeah, thanks so much for your flexibility on that. Yeah, that's the life of a founder. It's a little unpredictable sometimes, but appreciate it.
Definitely. So we'll talk about your journey, and also we talk about some of the biases and stereotype that might exist in this energy industry. So we will try to unlock lots of things behind these things, but I will start with what and why. So when I see your career, like you have worked across many different functions, but what drew you in this energy space? What was the thought behind starting your own journey as a founder or co-founder of Kanin Energy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to even when I was in college, when I was an undergrad at the University of Calgary. And Calgary in Canada is a kind of center of energy production, kind of the energy capital of Canada and one of the capitals of the world. And so energy was always around me. And I was also very climate aware and an environmentalist. And so being an environmentalist in a oil and gas producing city is kind of an interesting juxtaposition. And you live in the gray rather than taking one side or the other. I think you kind of live in this gray. And that started this thinking of, I think there's a need for energy that is never going to go away, but how do you do it in the most sustainable way? And so obviously in one sense, there's solar and wind, and that is on its own track and is growing and is poised for, more of like an established industry now. But then how do you unlock kind of these other technologies that aren't getting the light of day, not because they're bad technologies or they don't work, but merely because the ecosystem that supports it hasn't evolved yet. And so I really refined my thinking when I was in this problem of addressing energy production, doing it in a cleaner, more efficient way, but doing it with like newer technologies. I refined kind of that belief when I was at Generate Capital, which is, the investment fund that I was at right before creating Kanin Energy. And one of the core beliefs at that fund was, taking established technologies, but weren't quite fully, established yet in terms of the market, and trying to find ways to enable larger platforms. And so that really shaped my thinking. It goes back to when I was in college and trying to figure out how do I use business to catalyze climate action, and doing it in a thoughtful. Again, we live in a capitalist society. So how do you, take capital and do it in a way that it works within our system? And that's kind of brought me to this opportunity here.
Makes sense. And I also come from Calgary, Canada, so I can understand.
Yeah.
We are
there you
surrounded
go, right.
I can fully connect. That is surrounded by oil and gas, wherever you go. But coming out from that city and trying to do something different, I think that's really great. Yeah. But also I want to know, what was the moment when you realized industrial systems can be a powerful source of energy as an energy producer, not just as a consumer?
Yeah. And I think I'm going to go back to that Calgary. Like, you live in this gray where you don't necessarily ignore that part of our energy system, the oil and gas industry. When you're someone who's working on clean energy, you very much view that as part of the overall ecosystem. And when you have that framing, I think you start to think about, okay, they are a source of energy because of the pure waste heat that is being put off of it. But I did not come up with this idea myself, definitely not. I had a friend who was that I went to college with, also from Calgary, and him and a few other folks were working on a geothermal company. And so they stumbled upon this concept of heat recovery, taking heat, in that case geothermal heat, and turning it into electricity. And then they come up with the idea of, rather than drilling in the ground for that heat, looking above ground at these industrial sites to take that heat and turn it into power. It's almost like geothermal in a way, but without the drilling. And so we're looking to build out this company. And then they said, hey, Janice, you've got a lot of experience building development companies, funding them, and also operating in these nascent spaces. I was on the team that was doing a lot of investments into renewable natural gas, biogas, anaerobic digestion when, it wasn't really an industry that was well established yet. And I really enjoyed that experience of kind of getting into the weeds and doing a lot of market making. And so they said, hey, you have a lot of experience and success doing this. What if we build this concept of taking waste heat and turning into power at industrial sites? What if we made that a reality? So I said, hey, this is a very interesting challenge. It's a challenge that I think I know how to tackle given my time at Generate. And, as an investor, you get this very privileged view of being kind of sitting on top and seeing all these different companies and seeing success stories, not so successful stories. You see a lot of patterns, and there's a lot of pattern matching that you have to be good at when you're an investor. And so I kind of thought about this and said, hey, if I could build the company that I always invested in, what would that look like? I really loved being an investor, but one thing I didn't like was the lack of control that you had when in those micro moments, you're like, oh, I wish they would go after this market, or maybe, I think this is something that could be interesting. And, you don't want to exert your thoughts, you don't want to overplay your role as the investor. It's really their company. But so, I was kind of thinking maybe I want to take a shot at being an entrepreneur instead in this space. And that could be, my unique contribution at this time. So I made the jump. That was about 5.5 years ago. And then we started Kanin Energy, actually, more or less when the pandemic started. So we're a pandemic baby. So that was the first few years were definitely interesting and challenging. But I think it definitely strengthened our company and is a part of the resilience that we have today that is making us, who we are and as successful as we've been.
You already hit lots of things here, but let me unpack here. So you have lots of experience in investing, but coming from that background and running a company now, was there any bias or stereotypes you had about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're an entrepreneur that comes from that side, there's a lot of pros and cons. So a lot of pros. I had a pretty deep network and I guess credibility when speaking with investors. And so it made capital raising easier, but capital raising is never easy. So I say easier, but not easy. And I think that also it gave me an appreciation of the different kinds of investors. So would generate capital is a lot of project finance, few equity deals, but into companies, but those were kind of fewer and far between. So when you're in the role of an investor, you're kind of thinking of all the things that can go wrong, right? And even as an entrepreneur in your day-to-day life, I am it's kind of funny. There's a juxtaposition. It's these two kind of the angel and the devil on your shoulders. You got the angel on your shoulder being this thing is going to be a unicorn. It's going to be amazing. Everything's going to go right. You're going to be a billionaire and everyone around you is going to be a billionaire and things are going to be great. And then you have the other one, which is everything is going to be terrible. You are, if you don't look at these 50 different risks and think about all the different permutations of how it could go wrong, you're not not doing your job. Like, the role of a CEO and an entrepreneur and a founder is to balance those two, to be very optimistic and see the like kind of blue sky scenario, but protect the company and the people who you love and have helped you grow this thing, to protect them. So I think going back to your question, when you're an investor, you're more kind of, or at least as my kind of investment was more looking at the downside. And I was not in a kind of view, the optimism was coming from the entrepreneur. Now I had to flip it the other way around. When I was pitching investors, I had to pitch the big side and then know that they would kind of like mark everything down and be on the, be a little bit more pessimistic. So I think that was kind of an interesting adjustment. And I definitely had to refine my pitch.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Like, no, the script is flipped.
Yeah, the script has flipped. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you have to convince investors. And what is exciting, to be an investor or as a founder of company?
I mean, they both play their part. And I think, when I was an investor, I always respected the entrepreneur so much. Like, you take so much risk, like you put in so much work, and we want to make them successful. You also want to make your fund successful as well. So you're always helping them try to find these like win-win scenarios. You're all aligned. You're aligned in trying to find and grow the company. As it's kind of like different. And then when you're an entrepreneur, you're really thinking about like, how do you grow the company? And if you do that well, everybody wins. Yeah, they're different perspectives, but they're both very important perspectives and have a very important role to play. Investors need entrepreneurs just like entrepreneurs need investors. And so no one has, even though sometimes there might be power dynamics that are kind of either subconsciously maybe thought about or whatnot, at the end of the day, both need to be there and both need to win. And if both win, then everybody wins. And when one doesn't win or the other doesn't win, then that's just like, a situation that doesn't work. So yeah. And I think like as an entrepreneur, knowing that and having been an investor, being very open and upfront with saying like, this is how I plan to win. And this is how I think you're going to win too. Like, come with me on that journey. Being able to speak that language has been extremely helpful.
I think that's good for our listeners to understand. If somebody is thinking to start its own journey as an entrepreneur, like I think that makes sense. Don't just think in one way, but also think about other people that you're working with. Because this collective thinking and the decision making only brings something new on the table.
Alignment is incredibly important.
It's important. Yeah, definitely. And when you are doing that work by yourself, sometimes you have a bias, like you are just thinking in hollow or in that loop. You're thinking everything is good or either it's bad. But when you have a collective feedback from the team, either as an investor or as a founder, and that brings success. And Janice, you just talked about it. When you talk about energy mix, we always talk about new energy resources like renewables, wind, but a lot of time we miss to talk about efficiency and the industrial systems itself. Why is there bias in this decarbonization discussion? Why we don't talk about the things that we can do it now instead of creating like new energy resources?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and we live in this conundrum every day. So when you take waste heat to power, the technology is actually there. And there have been some minor innovations that have occurred over, call it the last decade in waste heat to power and waste heat recovery. There's definitely innovations, but I wouldn't say they're, breakthrough innovations that have enabled this technology to happen. They've kind of been there. So it's really about, why hasn't it been implemented? Not why hasn't it been invented, but why hasn't it been implemented? And I think one piece is if you don't have the right players in the room to make an industry happen, it just doesn't get off the ground. So when you think about early days in solar, and I have the privilege of having some of the solar pioneers like Tom Werner and Claire Borrow Johnson, who started SunPower and SunEdison, tell me about the early days of solar. And I equate it to a lot of the early days of this waste heat to power industry or even the efficiency industry. You need technology companies. So you have to have the technology that works, and it needs to keep innovating. You have to have developers, and that's really what Kanin is. We are a developer, and what a developer does is they go and they change laws, right? They go advocate for renewable energy credits and create demand for those credits. They're out there looking for tax incentives and they're looking for grants. They're looking for, lots of those different things that can help to boost the economics. They're also out there like just pounding the pavement on trying to get landowners or to put solar on their roofs or put solar in the ground on their farms and land. The equivalent here is that we're out there, pounding the pavement, telling industrial producers, heavy industry to say, hey, there's a missed opportunity there. So I think there's a lot of similarities of what happened in the early days of solar, of just like market making, creating the market that you want to serve. And I think the ones who were the early kind of innovators and the early developers really did well in that space. And so that's kind of same thought process here. Is it's not necessarily a technology play, because in the solar world, like, PV technology had been around for decades, but it was really when the business model and the developers came in that really made it an actual industry is when it started taking off. And then investors had like a spot to play in that as well. And so as that becomes more developed, more money, you need money to do these things, they were able to come in and make a healthy kind of return there. And we kind of see the same thing in our industry. So to answer your question, why hasn't this industry really gotten off the ground? It's because there hasn't been like a healthy developer ecosystem to make it past one-off technology installations.
Yes.
Technology providers, and you work at ABB, so you're probably closer to this than I am. Engineers and technology providers, they think about the tech and they think about installing it. But if you don't have,
there's infrastructure.
you literally think about like the infrastructure.
Yes.
But these are power projects. No one does cool stuff for the sake of doing stuff. Like it maybe starts there, but it ultimately has to get to a point where it makes economic sense. At some point there is a financial decision maker that says, okay, what's the business case for this? So new technologies, they kind of often struggle because they're really good at they call it engineering, the installation piece, the operations piece. But we need everything else. So that's capital providers, that's policymakers, that's like renewable energy buyers, that's, grant makers. There's a whole ecosystem that really enables an industry to get off the ground, which is hard, and which is why we don't see as many of these. We see a lot of breakthrough technologies not get past that, call it valley of death, or we see, first of a kind not necessarily get to the other side, is because you need so many ecosystem players to build and grow the industry first.
Makes sense. So how do you see the future of waste heat to power in the energy mix?
Yeah, and the reason why I love, what we're doing is it's unique. So just to kind of back up here, what our company does is we take waste heat that's otherwise just vented into the atmosphere. Almost half of the energy that goes into an industrial process is actually wasted in the form of waste heat. So there's a lot there. And especially when you think of heavy industrial facilities, like, a lot of oil and gas facilities, natural gas processing plants, natural gas compressor stations, refineries, and other, heavy industrial like steel, cement, fertilizer, glass. There's a lot of heat that is just required in that process.
Yes.
And then they don't have much to do with it. They'll recover as much as they can. And then there's a lot that's kind of just wasted. And so what's interesting with us, especially in this like macro environment right now, that we're seeing like heavily escalating power prices, power prices that are going up 20, 30, 50% in even some like very special scenarios. And then you see, there's still even though the pendulum has swung maybe away from necessarily green energy and kind of that like green energy for the sake of green energy to now like, looking at green energy from almost a more pragmatic view, but hasn't, I think if people are aware that the pendulum swings back and forth and that stakeholders eventually in society is going towards greener energy. One of the issues with prevalent clean electricity, mainly solar and wind, is that it's intermittent, right? And battery storage is definitely
Yes.
helping to boost that. But
Yeah.
there's still more than ever the need for base load power, something that's not intermittent, especially with AI and everything.
And that's what's coming. Like if you see in US, like all the new developments are going back to energy fired turbines based power plants.
Yeah, exactly, because that need for base load power and reliable power
Yes.
is there. And so what's interesting about what we do at our with Waste Heat to Power and at our company is we build projects. So we're a developer, and we're taking that waste heat. We're using a technology that works, and we're creating clean electricity, as there's no incremental combustion. So it's clean and it's base load because most of these industrial facilities are always operating. So it's not intermittent, and it becomes a hedge for power prices, for reliability, and to help, boost their sustainability story if they have it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of this like triple win. The issue that the industry has faced though is that they're not huge. The projects can range anywhere from 250 kilowatts to call it 20 megawatts. So we're not talking about utility scale solar and wind projects that are multi-billion dollars that, a lot of the energy infrastructure folks who play in that space, tend to veer towards. And it's not small enough for the industrial host to do it themselves. Right? It's not like switching out a pump or anything like that. It does actually require some like pretty hefty capex and a lot of human capital and expertise to make it happen. And it's, quite still heavily engineered because it's still, a power system that's integrated or is taking the waste heat from your plant. These things have, an 18 to 24 month construction cycle. So it's still infrastructure, and that scares a lot of the industrial hosts who otherwise would just do it themselves. So it kind of puts it out of reach for them. And that's why like a developer like ourselves can really help bridge that gap. And so if there's any, a company that's working on producing steel are not experts in producing power.
I fully agree.
Yeah. And if they're not if they do create a team that is doing that, there's limited opportunities for them to expand past that because that's not their bread and butter as well.
No.
So this is why, like, again, having these kind of like specialist developers come in and implement these solutions is really important to get that industry off the business. And our hope, though, is to also land and expand to other technology offerings as well with that same customer. So we're expanding our offering to CHP just because of power prices rising. We're seeing a lot of demand from our existing partners and people just kind of reaching out to us to find those solutions. So that's been an interesting shift that we've seen over the last year or so. Again, now we're not losing the waste heat to power business. That's definitely a focus and continues to grow. But, we're always looking for how else can we help our industrial customer with their energy needs, help them reduce their emissions.
Makes sense. So there are lots of things that Kanin Energy is doing, like they're developing infrastructure and also bring something unique on the table. But if you to underline one key advantage of working with Kanin Energy, what that would be?
Yeah, I think it comes back to we are servicing industrial customers, and by nature, none of them are power experts. They do not. Their bread and butter is not to create electrons, but ours is. And so that's the main benefit here. And then you kind of go a layer deeper and we say like, so how can we help you? So some of our customers, they don't want to put out the money themselves. They want us to own it.
Okay.
And they'll either pay a power purchase agreement, like they'll pay a fixed price for power because they want to hedge with escalating power prices. They want to save on those power prices. Great. We will do that. We just closed a deal with a large refining and gas company. And so hopefully that announcement will come out in the next few months here. But that's exactly it. They were not experts in the space and they didn't want to put their money. It doesn't mean they're a multi-billion-dollar company. It's not that they don't have money. They would prefer to put it to their core business. And they said, hey, you fund it. We just want to pay like a fixed price. That's it. And then they said, hey, what else can you do? And so we're looking at other opportunities with them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And you take their risk away then. Like, so if somebody is thinking to do something in that space, you come with a solution and also with the financing. So you're saying like, I will develop that project for you. I will run that project for you, and then you pay as per the agreement.
Yeah. And sometimes the host wants to pay for it themselves, and that's okay too. And we can also just act as a developer. We also have ways for us to do joint ventures. And so if they want to own some of it and we own some of it, we actually like that model because it's an alignment of incentives. That's fine. We're pretty flexible in ownership. But I think like what we've seen consistently, though, regardless of like whether they need our capital or not, is that they're just not experts. And so having the special focus team, that this is like what they do, they have a relationship with vendors that can kind of drive costs down. They're kind of lean and nimble. So that also just drives like implementation costs down. They can operate like that kind of expertise is really what we see is a driving value proposition.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. So now going back to your founder's journey, so how do you balance your financial discipline and versus running the company? Because you're coming from that investor background. So you'd already talked about few things, but how do you balance that? Because that's a challenge we see with lots of entrepreneurs and startup founders. It's very hard to balance the financial discipline and also the running a company efficiently.
A financial discipline of, you mean just limited resources at the company?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is that it's not even just limited resources from a money perspective. It's also time. It's what's available to you in terms of people and et cetera. So I think when you're an entrepreneur, to start on that journey, you have to be scrappy and resilient and creative. And so in a way, like, while I don't prefer to not have I wish I had all the money at my disposal. But I think constraints breed innovation. And so being able to, I'm very proud of our company. Like, we are incredibly financially disciplined. We've been under budget every single year of our forecasts. And we're incredibly financially disciplined. And this is because like, if you kind of get over your skis on your kind of costs, that just puts a lot of pressure on you that you may not be able to fulfill on. And so being able to manage your costs well kind of takes a little bit of stress off the table of, having to aggressively grow if it's not something that like your industry can necessarily sustain, right? And a lot of startups kind of get in this space. And so you have to right size your financial burn to the speed limit or the speed limit of your industry and the type of car that you're driving. So it doesn't matter that you have like a Lamborghini, but if the speed limit is like 50 miles an hour, you can't go that fast.
Yes,
right. And so you kind of have to, right? Like, and that analogy is like, if the market is in a spot where it's only purchasing so many of these projects a year and the sales cycles are long, then you kind of have to right size your company. And so in the early days, especially, we were like, okay, let's be more conservative and let's kind of keep testing it out. And I think, now we're almost up to 20 people in our team here, which is still, very small compared to other companies, but is a comfortable kind of size of where we're at right now, kind of given like our growth trajectory and where we want to be. But yeah, so I think like, that's just part of the journey. You should have constraints. It's really like the test of the company's resilience and kind of scrappiness is actually a really good, I think, I look at, a marker of how successful they would be.
So that challenge keeps you grounded,
Yeah.
and focused.
Well, grounded, absolutely. Prioritization. And this is not just me, like our entire team is really, good at this. This is built into our culture. Is like, let's reevaluate, like, are we prioritizing the right things? We don't have unlimited resources. So what do we want to do? Which industries we want to go after? Which deals do we want to go after? Yeah. Again. Yeah.
No, makes sense. I think, and that's I think true for anything. Like even for the small companies or startups, and also for the big companies, there are never unlimited resources. So we always have to find where to focus. I work for ABB. We do the same thing.
Right.
Like sometimes the market tells you like you should focus on multiple things, but when you try to focus on multiple things, you don't achieve anything. So that's a focus approach is needed. That also brings us to our rapid fire round. Janice, are you ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's see. Most underestimated opportunity in industrial decarbonization.
Most underestimated. I mean, obviously, I'm going to talk about, it's waste heat to power. Yeah, obviously.
One myth about clean energy transition.
Sorry?
Myth
One
about
myth.
clean energy transition.
I think this is, a lot of people already know this, but one myth is like you can do it all with solar and wind, and you
Yeah,
can.
makes sense. And we already talked about a lot. Like whenever we think about energy mix, we always go with the conventional thinking of solar and wind, but there are many other things that can be done. Makes sense. Technology innovation that excite you the most.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in some of the carbon capture technologies that are out there. One day we're not doing this quite yet, but we are very much interested in how the carbon capture space evolves because we touch that exhaust that has carbon in it. And so one day it would be great to turn that into an asset, a revenue generation opportunity. So yeah, we're very excited about that, where that space is going.
Makes sense. Hardest challenge for climate tech founders.
Yeah. So I used to work for Jigger Shaw, which many people on this podcast may know. And one thing that he said to me that stuck with me has almost become a mantra at Kanin is don't believe your own bullshit. And so as an entrepreneur, your job as a founder and CEO, your job is to go out there and tell the world how great your company is. But on the inside, you have to be grounded to, where is your company actually at? Where are your resources that are finite? The limitations of just, a lot of different things, and to be kind of eyes wide open about that so that you can address it in order to grow. So I think that's something that, is a piece of advice.
Makes sense. A habit that helps you stay effective as a leader.
Yeah, so I recently had a baby. She's not even a baby anymore. She's 2 years old. And one thing as a new mom, you always hear is like it's just a season. Everything is just a season. And that's totally true when you're raising a baby and a toddler. And those things come and go. So when things are good, it's just a season. Enjoy it. When things are bad, hey, it's also just a season. Like you'll get past this. So it really helps. I think that mentality of just like it helps you get through the good times and bad, and kind of keeps it just like a stable.
So don't get too much excited or either depressed.
Oh,
So
yeah, things will turn
time will
around.
pass. That's great. What failure taught you as an entrepreneur?
What failure taught you
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur? Yeah. I think that culture is very important. And I think when you come from an investor kind of mindset, especially in project finance, you tend to kind of look at the numbers a lot. And so what being a founder and CEO has really taught me is that like the numbers is a very trailing indicator. And what is a leading indicator is the people and the culture that lead with and create for your people. So companies are built by people, especially kind of we're going in this growth stage, and I'm really appreciating now more than ever. It's ultimately a lot of other people that are doing the work. And so you're just kind of guiding as a leader. And because of that, you got to hire people that like believe in Kanin values and believe in like the mission and the vision of the company. So it comes down to, I don't think I truly fully appreciated this is all about people. The numbers will come if you got the good people in place.
You're right. Yeah, I fully agree. Numbers will come. If you're taking all the steps, goal will be achieved. But sometimes we are focused too much on the goal and we forget about the steps or actions that need to be taken. So,
Totally.
but you made a point, and I fully believe in this one. If you take the right steps, things will happen eventually. Makes sense. Last not the least, complete this sentence. The future of energy will be shaped by people who
Fearless.
never give up.
Yeah, when you have to be bold, you have to be fearless. This is, you're doing things that are never been done before at the cutting edge. And so you kind of have to put fear aside and just go do it. Otherwise, the world will never change.
No, that's also bring us at the end of our discussion. Let me ask you, if somebody listened to this conversation after 5 years, what one idea about this energy transformation or decarbonization you hope they will think differently or understand differently?
I hope that people truly appreciate the different avenues to get to energy transition, and that there's lots of different levers to pull. So there's room for breakthrough technologies. There's room for, industrial efficiency, which is essentially what we are. And there's a lot of room in the middle. And so we can't ignore any of those options. A lot of times we deal with groups that kind of chase these shiny things, and then they forget solutions like ours, which are, kind of like they're not home runs, but, they get you kind of the few points you need to win. And so there's room kind of across the board to help achieve those goals. There's a lot of gray. And
Makes
it's
sense.
also a long journey. You
It's a
need
long journey. I fully agree. Actually, we do the same thing actually at ABB. Lots of our products, we promote energy efficiency. And
yes.
when we talk about energy efficiency, it could be in fractions. But in fractions, if you can add multiple motors and fractional change in the efficiency gain, it's a paramount. Sometimes
That's
people
right.
ignore those incremental changes.
Yeah, maybe I'll leave you with a success story that we have. So we're about to turn on our first waste heat to power project and begin operations in about a couple months. And so
Mm.
this is in Ohio, and it's with a partner called Tallgrass Energy, and they're a midstream, a pipeline company. And they have waste heat across their pipelines because that's just something that most natural gas pipelines have. And so we're taking that, converting into electricity. In our first project with them, we're selling all the electricity to the University of Dayton. And that is 10 megawatts of clean, base load electricity. It's able to power that entire 11,000 student campus all on this wasted heat. And so again, like these are things that when times are tough, I think back and I say, hey, those students at the University of Dayton are getting free electricity that is saving them a significant amount of money too. So these win-win solutions are all around us. And I'll just leave you with that. There's lots of those opportunities all across the US and Canada and the world.
The world needs a lot of power, and solution like this is going to change a game here because it's not about just one resource. I think it's a mix of all the energy resources that we are talking about. And waste to power is one avenue that is not explored that much, but I think is going to play a big part in the future. But before we sign off, Janice, anything to add here?
No, thank you so much for welcoming onto the podcast. And I would welcome the conversation from any of your listeners. I'm an energy nerd, so I love talking about this. I love talking about energy, and I love talking about industrial decarb. So look me up on LinkedIn and send me a note.
That's excellent. So if this conversation challenged your bias and stereotypes about energy mix or decarbonization, please share your thoughts in comments. Also, keep breaking bias with one conversation at a time. So see you next week. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.